Thank you very much. So who doesn't want to make $1 million, right? When Sean, I apologize, I've got a little bit of a cold, so if my voice breaks a little bit, I'm not hitting puberty. It's just the fact that I've got a cold. So when Sean first came and said, hey, would you come and speak at this event? I was like, what could I possibly speak on? And I was just thinking through that, and really, you know, when people think about me, many people know me as the crazy guy that picked up the snake and got bit. Other people know me as the guy that manages the e-commerce business. And today, for the first time ever, I'm going to publicly speak about what I've been doing on the side for the last 20 years that's trying to help me make $1 million. So our time is tight. I'll jump in quickly and just want to say as well, thank you to Carly, to Sean, to the Toastmasters group for putting this on. It's so much work to put an event on like this, and really appreciate you doing that. And for Belk and just supporting an organization like this where we have a chance to take a break from our daily jobs to come and get some other ideas and be inspired. Rewind back in my life about 25 years. I was in college. I was newly married. We had a little kid. My wife was teaching at a local elementary school. We were dirt poor. And I remember talking to my wife saying, we've got to start thinking about this kid and getting ahead, and financially we've got to think about, you know, how we're going to prepare for the future. And so we started putting money aside. My brother-in-law had an MBA. He was a financial planner with a very, you know, distinguished company. And so I went and talked to him, and he says, I'm going to help you out. So I remember the first year we scrimped, we saved, we gave him $1,000. And at the end of that first year, we went and sat down with him. We said, all right, walk us through how we did. And he sat down, he kind of hemmed and he hawed, and he said, you lost $113 of the $1,000 I gave you gave to me. And I said, well, walk me through that. So he walked me through it. And I said, well, how much did you lose? And he says, well, what do you mean? I said, well, how much did you lose as you were managing that for me? He says, well, I didn't lose money. I said, well, how much did you make? And he made like $100. And I said, well, how much did the stock traders make as they traded the stocks that you picked on my behalf? And they made like $100. And everyone made money except for me. And so I started thinking about that. And during that time, I had some great people in my life, and they put me in touch with 4 different books. The Millionaire Next Door. It talks about the fact that there are millionaires all around us, and many of them are living next door, and they're not the ones that you see on TV, and they're not the ones that are driving the fancy cars. They're the people that just live below their means, and they put money aside and they pay themselves first. And so I read that and went, interesting. Richest Man in Babylon talks about a story of this scroll that's found. And it talks about Babylon. And the king of Babylon says there are people that are rich and there are people poor. How do we get more of the poor people rich? And they find the richest man in Babylon, and he teaches the principles of wealth. And in that, he finds out that you can actually teach ways for anyone to become rich. And he teaches those ways to become rich. Rich Dad, Poor Dad talks about paying yourself first. That in our lives, we pay our phone bill, we pay our mortgage, we pay our car bill, we pay for clothes, we go out to eat, we do all these things. But are we paying and investing in ourselves so that we can have a strong financial future? And most of us don't. And he says we need to stop and say, I'm going to pay myself first, and then what's left I'm going to live on. And that was really, really, really inspiring for me. And then Creating Wealth with Robert Allen, he talked about a way that with real estate, you can buy properties and make money. And essentially he said you buy 10 properties, hold them for 10 years, sell half of those properties, pay the other half of the properties off, and you've got this awesome asset. And so I started looking at that, and I quickly realized that I was done with my brother-in-law. I fired him. I remember one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I sat down, I walked him through and said, I'm going to invest in real estate. And he says, that all sounds good. I just don't understand. How do I play into that picture? I said, well, you don't. And I had to fire my own brother-in-law. Luckily, my sister still talks to me and he still loves me. My brother-in-law kind of does. But in those books I read, you know, in Richest Man in Babylon, 2 quotes I loved. A fool and his money are soon parted. So true. I found that out that first year. And the second one is the goddess of good luck blesses those who act. In our lives, there are opportunities that are dealt to every one of us. And we may say that person's lucky because they were in the right place at the right time. But it's not just that. It's that they took action. And in our lives, we need to take action. So I'm going to talk to you today about some things. And as we think about investing in real estate, I think that sometimes we don't because we feel like it's intimidating or it's hard or it's, I can't do that. That's not for me. And the truth is, any of us can do what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about some ways that every one of us tomorrow could start doing this if we wanted to. And what I've been doing the last 20 years. Why real estate? As I think about real estate, first, a hard asset. I love that it's something you can see, touch, and feel. Someone always needs a place to live. And so I like investing in real estate. There are tax advantages. It appreciates and goes up over time. I talk to my kids about appreciating assets, depreciating assets, and expenses. And a piece of real estate, if you buy in the right area, it should go up in value over time. If I go out and buy a car, the minute I drive away from the lot, it's 30% less valuable than it was when I bought it. It's a depreciating asset. Every day I drive it, every mile I put on it, it goes down in value. Real estate is one of the few assets that goes up in value. And then there are expenses, like a phone where you buy it, and the minute you buy it, it's just an expense, and it just eats up your money. And so I started trying to teach my kids as I thought about it, and I started thinking, in my life there are appreciating assets, there are depreciating assets, and there are expenses. And if I can take more of my money and put it in the first class, over time it's going to have a powerful effect on me getting to $1 million mark and beyond than if I'm putting them into class number 2 or class number 3. So let's start talking about this. As you think about investing, Warren Buffett again says, people make things really difficult. It's really not that difficult. There's, again, some very simple things you can do to move quickly on this. I love what Buffett says about investing. Rule number 1 of investing, what is it? Never lose money. Rule number 2, don't forget rule number 1. So as we go through this, you will never lose money if you decide to never lose money, okay? So just remember that. I like it because it's true. The third one is markets can price the things wrong. I never even thought about this. With real estate, many times there are properties that are overvalued, undervalued, and if you can get an eye for value and see that, there are deals to be had all around. And so many times those deals don't even hit the market. You got to be talking to people, but there are deals to be had. And just since someone's asking for a price on a house doesn't mean that that's what it's worth. It could be worth more or less than that. You know, if I walked up to someone today and said, will you give me $10,000? They'd be like, get out of here, creepo. But like if someone's selling their house and they're saying, I want to sell for $400,000, I can go and say, I'll pay you $375,000, and I could ask for $25,000, and they might say, yeah, sure. And it's one of the few things where you can actually go and ask people for large chunks of money, and many times they're willing to give it to you. And so you have a great opportunity, and sometimes they just need to sell it. And they're desperate, and so you have a great opportunity there as well. Next thing is you're thinking about investing in real estate. Great opportunities don't come by every day. When you see them, jump on them. You know, the goddess of good luck blesses those that act. One of the things that I saw as I started looking at real estate is I started looking at lots of different properties. And by doing that over time, I started to see that properties in this area that kind of had these attributes, they're worth this much. And in the others, they're worth that much. And so I could see value over time. And then just surround yourself with good people that know what they're doing. It makes a big difference. They'll teach you. You can learn so much if you just talk to people. So as I think about making money, I think about these 5 areas: appreciation, cash flow, tax savings, flipping real estate, and amortization. So let's just jump right in. Appreciation. I bought this house in Utah. I bought it in 2001 for $170,000. I sold it last year in 2017 for $435,000. It just went up in value over time. I bought it in a good area. So you just buy things in the right area and they go up over time. It's an appreciating asset. This is an index of what an average home looks like across the country. Red are most expensive, yellow are less expensive. But what the interesting thing is here are the 4 states I've lived in the last 10 years. These are the values in the last 7, if you go back to like 1975, you can see what they've done. And you can see that there are high points where you don't want to buy and low points where you do, but generally they go up over time. And if you look at a house in Utah, $237,000 in 2000, it's worth $448,000 in 2018. You go to other places that I've lived in like Chicago, and Chicago $231,000, it's almost the same price, it's only worth $345,000. I'd make an extra $115,000 buying an area that goes up in value more over time. You look in this area, there are areas appreciating faster, areas not appreciating as fast. So make sure you get into a good area. So as you think about that, think about your primary place of occupancy. If you're living in a house, It's better to have a second house that's going up in value over time. You could eventually sell that and get your money out, or you could rent it or do something else. If it's a house you're living in, then you always have to have a place to live. Going up over time, the appreciation doesn't help you as much. So second way you make money in real estate is cash flow. I lived in that place. Get back. I lived in that place, and I bought it. I had a mortgage of $1,000 a month. I had an apartment down in the basement. I rented it out for $800 a month. My mortgage was $200 a month. I let someone pay 80% of my mortgage. And this is an eightplex that I bought later on, about 10 years later, as I saved up, and that one I'm able to rent it out. So as you think about cash flow, I love the idea of a mother-in-law apartment. If you've got a basement, if you've got an upstairs, if you've got a section of your home that you could rent out, you ought to look at whether you could do that. You need to look at the laws of where you live and whether you can do that. If you're living in a house for 10 years and you want to buy another house, rent the old house out and just keep it and let it appreciate over time. You'll have a hard time finding something that goes up in value more than real estate does in most areas, and rent the old home. You could buy a new rental property. I know people that buy beach houses and buy cabins and other stuff, and they rent them out over time. So there are ways you can make money with that through cash flow. The third way is tax savings. These are all things that I've purchased, and I just wrote them off. And the roof on this, I wrote it off. The lawn on this, I was able to write it off because they were investment properties. So as you have investment properties, improvements on it you can write off, tools you can write off, mileage you can write off, trips you can write off. If you have a neighbor who does this and he goes on a trip to Hawaii and they talk about their next round of investments, he writes off the vacation. So obviously you got to follow the law, you got to talk to accountants, but there's ways through great tax savings. One of the best tax savings is depreciation. You buy a house for $475, the land's worth $100, the building's worth $375. If it's being rented out, you get to take the value of the building, divide it by 25 years, and you get to write that off. It saves you $6,000 a year. And so it's a non-cash expense that you get to write off over time. So improvements you get to write off, and depreciation you get to write off. That's one of the biggest ways that people make money in real estate. And then flipping. This is a house that I rode my bike by every day coming home from work. One day they put a for sale by owner sign. I went over and talked to the guy. He bought it for $97,000. I put about $7,000 into it. I sold it for $138,000. And so that was one. That's a lot of work though, and you got to kind of know what you're doing if you're doing that. But that's an opportunity as well as flipping properties. And the final thing that I'll say making money in real estate is amortization tables. This is what happens when you take a loan out. If you took a loan out for a house, $500,000 house, if you paid it off over 30 years, you'd pay $1.2 million. $500,000 plus a $700,000 of interest. It's crazy. And if you look at when you're first paying it off, my very first year, 15% of what I pay goes to paying down the value of the house, my principal, 85% goes to interest. And then over time, that principal goes up and the interest goes down. So if you're refinancing your house 15 years in, you always are just paying interest, you're never paying it down. So one of the secrets that I do is buy a house that you can more than afford. And I won't live in a house unless I can put a little extra money every single month into paying it down, because as I look at this first month, if I pay if I pay my mortgage is $3,500, $400 goes to principal, $3,000 is interest. If I pay an extra $400, it saves me $3,000 of interest early on. That first year, if I was to invest $2,500 in paying down my principal, it saved me $18,000 in interest. So again, like if you could go on a trip for $2,000, if you could pay down your mortgage $2,000, it saves you so much money in interest if you can understand that over time. So just, again, the goal is get into a place that you can more than afford, and then you can put extra money into buying an extra place or paying down where you're at. So again, just a summary on making $1 million. Be careful who you trust. Be careful, because there are people out there that will make money with your money and you won't necessarily make money, but you got to just take control. The goddess of good luck blesses those who act, and a fool and his money are soon parted. Never lose money. You know, again, like when you think about that, and this is the final thing that I'll say, is when you think about that, the best way you can do that is buy it for the right price. And you say, well, what's the right price? You know, for me, the right price is if I buy it, I could sell it tomorrow and make money. I could rent it and I could make money, or I could keep it and I could cash flow just fine and I'm not going to get in trouble. So just be careful. Make sure you buy things for the right price. And if you do that, there's great opportunities to make just large amounts of money over time. Appreciation, cash flow, tax savings, flipping, amortization. Those are my 5 best areas that I've enjoyed looking at. And if you can do small things now, over time it makes a big difference, and you'll be able to get to that mark of making $1 million. Thank you very much.